Ancient knowledge included the planets Uranus and Neptune, supposedly unknown until discovered in 1781 and 1846, and even Pluto, not discovered until 1930. But most surprising was the inclusion of one more large planet as the 12th member of our solar system. The story of this planet, as told by the Sumerians on their 7 tablets of creation, begins 4 billion years ago, when our solar system was much younger and our own planet Earth did not yet exist.
Out of deep space, there appeared an intruder called Nibiru. Drawn into the center of our solar system, passing by Neptune and Uranus and Saturn and Jupiter, it faced an older planet called Tiamat. In a series of collisions, one half of Tiamat was smashed completely into bits and pieces. It became the comet, and became what the Bible and the Sumerian epic called a firmament. The other half, what we now call Earth, was thrust into a new orbital position. It carried along Tiamat's main satellite, which became our moon. Nibiru itself was caught into a permanent clockwise orbit around our sun, returning to our neighborhood once in every 3,600 years, and forever becoming the 10th planet of our solar system.
Many of the conglomerate space agencies such as NASA, Jet Propulsion Laboratories, Goddard Space Center have been doing a lot of new research into space, looking for signs of life or how life first arose on Earth. One of the interesting things that they've been undertaking is sending space probes to analyze comet data and fragments of asteroids and meteorites, and looking for possible signs of life. More specifically, we just had a mission by NASA that some of you might be aware of called Contour, which was to go behind a comet and to release an aerogel catcher that would take these fragments from the comet and then analyze it for looking for signs of life, water, minerals, stuff like that. Unfortunately, the Contour spacecraft was lost. There is no explanation as to how it was destroyed. One of the missions NASA did a while back was that they, with the Galileo probe, they took images of the outer solar system, and when they got to Jupiter and took pictures of its various moons, it has 4 in total, it turns out that 2 of them, Ganymede and Callisto, have extensive volcanic activity, high heat. And one of the other moons, known as Europa, has extensive ice sheet, like plate tectonic activity, but they theorize that below Europa's surface, there could be a 40-mile ocean. And so we theorize, again, the basic elements needed for life, water and heat. It's very possible that another moon within our own solar system, Jupiter's moon, could contain life. Because here on Earth, when we break thermal vents and go down hundreds of miles into the ocean, we find in the coldest depths of water where there's no sunlight, except for heat being emitted from these thermal vents, there's bacteria and life thriving in remote elements where there is no sunlight. So again, when we get into the more of the controversial aspects as to where do humans fit into the picture, there are 2 overriding butting heads that come into play. Usually it's religious views and mainstream science views, science and religion butting heads. The one theory that holds weight or has been most commonly talked about is Darwinian evolution. Something ever so simplistic will gradually become ever more complex. The missing link, as they like to call it, the gap in this theory, is that the anthropological bone record, which is now about 5 million years old, traces us looking at this skull compared to this skull, Neanderthal man, Australopithecine, and they keep working it all the way up. But unfortunately, they haven't been able to find a species a bone structure that can connect the pre-hominoid Neanderthal man to us. So they say there's a missing link, and they're going to somehow find this species that connects us with Neanderthal man. Hasn't happened yet. So that's why Darwinian evolution has, as they like to call it, some missing links. Look at many of the megalithic structures all over the earth, such as Stonehenge, Giza, Machu Picchu, Tiwanaku. We have many megalithic structures all over the earth that suggest it's possible that Earth's civilizations date back much farther than the known history of what is. Another interesting megalithic monument here. This is in Baalbek in Lebanon. Trilithoton stones, stones that weigh in the thousands. I think it's Trilithoton. I always get that confused, but I know they're called Trilithoton. These enormous rocks were stacked perfectly here in Baalbek in Lebanon. Now, why this is so amazing is that these rocks were quarried 5 miles away and then somehow brought here and stacked up as a platform. So when we look at all of these artifacts and remnants of past cultures, we start to wonder, well, where is the oldest? Who was the first human culture on Earth? And dating back through all the records, we have before the Incas, before the Mayans, before the Egyptians, before the Romans, before the Greeks, the first culture that shows up 6,000 years ago was known as the Sumerians. And they're the first culture literally right out of the Stone Age. So it makes it kind of intriguing because the first culture we have record of on Earth happens to be one of the most amazing ones. The Sumerian culture is where modern-day Iraq is today. Basically, today's Iraq was then known as Mesopotamia, Sumer, Babylon. 6,000 years ago, its initial name was Sumeria. This is where the first culture on Earth stems from. They have left us over 100 of the first for a civilization to take place, meaning we attribute to the Sumerian culture agriculture, math, medicine, science, agriculture, math, medicine, science, the idea of marriage, and of course, like I said, writing being one of the most key things. You can see it's a stone tablet. The Sumerians were the first ones to key the term writing in stone. What they did is they would take their clay tablets and write out their characters on it, and then put the clay tablet in a stove called a kiln. They literally keying the word writing in stone because it would then turn it into stone. That's why stories of prevalence or the higher priority, they would carve it into precious stone. Another interesting thing about the Sumerians is they had their own version of a modern-day printing press. What they would do is they had something called a cylinder seal, and it was a little cylinder seal, a little round seal that had a reverse imprint on it. So they could roll it into the clay and leave a positive imprint and disseminate information throughout the city very quickly, like a clay printing press. Just roll these out and get information and messages out to the public. This is a symbol for Nibiru, which incidentally is a cross. And these 7 dots represent Earth and our moon. Not really sure what the symbology behind that is, but that is a very interesting artifact. It's containing a winged disc, some type of flying object above the people. So when we look at the Bible, references to angelic beings, and the idea that heaven is somewhere up there and these beings come down to earth. We have many stories in the Bible of experiences where men and women, actually had interactions with their gods. Usually, like I was mentioning earlier, it's more than a mythological sense, where when we see imagery to describe interaction with this type of being, or Jesus coming down to heaven, or from heaven to earth, it's still kind of mythological. They don't really, most people won't go, even if I'm a Christian, I still have a hard time believing, seeing someone coming down and being here in front of us. So that's still widely prevalent to this day. But the interesting thing about that is that the Sumerian culture, if you'll recognize we're in the year 2002, which is basically about 2,000 years removed from when the time of Christ was here, BC AD. So, 6,000 years, 4,000 years, what's the difference? Just to give you an idea, we're 2,000 years removed from the time of Christ. Add on to that another 4,000 years, and you're at the time of the Sumerians, 4,000 years before the time of Christ. And look at this. They're showing clear depictions of beings coming down from heaven to earth, meeting another king here, a Sumerian king, but just namely the specific winged disc of someone, showing a representation of flight. A close-up on this. This is held in the British Museum as well. And this slide clearly, again, 4,000 years before the time of Christ, the Sumerian representation of Anunnaki, which meant those who from heaven come to earth. Here it is, 4,000 years before Christianity. Interaction with this planet and Earth, and cataclysms that could take place. But there is a lot of scientific as well as Sumerian evidence that there is another planet within our solar system, whether you want to call it Nibiru or Planet X. And yet clearly here, as a backdrop, we have our solar system with the sun in the center. And just that fact alone, right, through Copernicus and Galileo and various other advances in science, we thought that we were the center of the universe until we were able to use telescopes and understand that we orbit the sun. Yet clearly the Sumerians are depicting our solar system not only with all the planets accurately, but just the simple fact that they knew about the sun being in the center is evidence alone saying, how did they know that? How did they know that? So some of the interesting information that the Sumerians have bequeathed to us, and this is again where I'll mention some of the more symbolic references. They called Earth the seventh planet. Now, if you're cool and hip today, you call it Earth the third rock from the sun. But they called it the seventh planet for a specific reason, because if you start from the outside of our known 9 planets that we know of, we go Pluto, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Earth is the seventh planet. The sacred number 7, 7 days in a week, 7 tablets of creation by the Sumerians. And again, the whole idea that the Sumerians not only talk about the 9 planets we know of, they discuss that the solar system actually has 12. I mean, they count on 9 planets, the sun, the moon, and Nibiru. This 12th planet that the Sumerians speak of is past Pluto. In fact, it goes well beyond Pluto. The Voyager probe that we sent out to image the outer planets in the 70s was one of the first probes to actually, for NASA, to actually see color images of the outer planets, of Uranus and Neptune. They actually measured the distance between the planets as well, and also found some interesting perturbations. Perturbations is what it's called. Meaning there's something. The Sumerians, again, were confirmed by their knowledge that the probes sent out by Voyager confirmed, yes, the distance between the planets, what the color of the planets looked like. The Sumerians wrote all this down accurately 6,000 years ago, and it was proven by the Voyager and Galileo space probes. Planet X in the past, known as Nibiru, actually had an interaction with our primitive Earth, and was one of the main bases for our cosmology, meaning science today is still trying to figure out through the theory of a Big Bang how the solar system came to be. The Sumerians have their own explanation as well. They say that 4.7 billion years ago, no, they don't state that number specifically, but they do say, in a way of explaining that in the creation of our solar system, in the beginning, which we correlate to 4.7 billion years ago, Planet X was pulled by the gravitational effect of the outer planet and got sucked into the inner part where it had this interaction with our primitive Earth, then called Tiamat. Now, Planet X did not strike. Planet X did not strike Earth. One of the moons of Nibiru swung around and cracked our Earth. That's what caused our Earth to be broken up, is one of the satellites of Nibiru struck our primitive Earth, and in the process of doing that, strewed out the asteroid belt and leading our planet to be half a planet. So, if this interaction did take place and we were left with just half a planet, how is it that the Earth is now a round sphere? When we understand the idea of Pangaea, the scientific evidence says is that through continental drift and plate tectonics, all the continents were once connected in one landmass. So, if we siphon off all the water, it would have just been one chunk of land. All planets, scale into a sphere just through gravitational forces. So could Earth be half a planet? Again, just illustrating that if you take all the pieces and connect them, they do fit. The search for Planet X has even been going on by NASA. There's significant scientific evidence to prove that this planet does exist. All the evidence points to a rogue comet theory This was one of the first images taken by Hubble that shows, keep in mind this is not our sun, another star that has a planet orbiting it with an elliptical orbit. Scientists didn't think it was possible for planets to have an elliptical orbit, yet here is one. Even through modern science, we have had various reports that scientists have been detecting something beyond Pluto, which suggests another planet. There is a lot of scientific evidence that says, yes, there is a planet X. And the ancient information, yes, there is a Nibiru, and it has cataclysmic events when it passes us. Pole shifts, plate tectonic activity, whatever you want to call it, all of this science exists.
The 12 members of our solar system were identified in Mesopotamia by specific symbols. Some, as for Mars, Earth, and Venus, indicated their position numerically, as on this ancient tablet.
We see the sun with its many rays. We see the symbols standing for 4 of them in the bottom row. We see another 4 depicted standing on their cult animals, but really the symbolism connected with the zodiac. We see the moon, and we see the earth, symbolized by the 7 dots, which indicated the position of the earth from the outer limits of the solar system, counting or coming inwards by somebody flying into from outer space.
The 7 dots of Earth and its crescent moon, and the 6-pointed star of Mars, are revealing clues in this 4,500-year-old Sumerian inscription. It shows 2 figures standing on either side of the craft. A spaceman on Earth on the left, greeting a spaceman on Mars.
I was especially intrigued by independent researchers' suggestions in their reports that the orientation of the face and adjoining pyramid indicated they were built in alignment with sunrise at solstice time on Mars about 450,000 years ago. According to my conclusions, the Anunnaki had first landed on Earth about 450,000 years ago. It was perhaps no coincidence that the 2 dates coincide.
The only plausible theory is that someone, neither from Earth nor Mars, capable of space travel almost 500,000 years ago, had visited this part of the solar system and had left behind monuments both on Earth and on Mars. The only beings for which evidence has been found are the Anunnaki.